And welcome to 66 Think Tank on this Friday. This is where we all get together and think about ideas and chew the fat and see what we can come up with. Now, this week's topic is creatures from alternate Earths. There are a lot of theories or ideas out there where there's multiple histories, multiple alternatives. So, what kind of creature would live on an alternate Earth? So, we've got a few ideas to go through. With us this week as a slightly reduced field, it's myself, Chris Tregenza, Patrick and Emily King. And I'm going to hand over to Pat now to go through the check-ins for the week.
Okay, well, first on my check-ins is Patrick King. So, Patrick King, how was your week? My week was very good, Patrick King. I've gotten some more hours at work, so unfortunately I haven't had so much free time, but I'm probably going to get a lot more money on my next paycheck. That's very nice, Patrick. Next I'll ask Emily. Emily, how was your week?
My week's been pretty good. It's gone far too quickly. And yeah, I've got loads of stuff to do, so hopefully next week I'll have some more time.
Okay. And next it's Chris. Chris, how have you been?
Not too bad. Sort of somewhat sort of awkward and sort of confused week with lots of things going off, but mostly things getting sorted out. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I have a new job lined up. But I've got I sort of need to go and see the guy tomorrow and sort things out with him. But yeah, hopefully that will settle things down and I can actually plan a little bit because everything's a bit chaotic at the moment. But so reasonably good week from my point of view.
Oh, that's very good. Look forward to hearing about that. Mark, how have you been?
I've been ill, and then so I was ill for a bit, and then the bath drained into the hallway, so we've got plumbing to sort out and things. So yeah, it's not been an amazing week on the whole, but work's gone quite well, and yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, on the whole, I'm okay, but I'm better now.
Good. Well, that sounded a lot like that episode of Breaking Bad. Anyway, yeah, well, that's it for check-ins, because that's everyone who's here. So I'll pass back to Chris for creatures from alternate Earths.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, creatures from alternate Earths. So this is basically the idea that there are alternate Earths. At a subatomic level, everyone's heard of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and, putting the cat in the box and not knowing whether it's alive and dead. This basic principle is that every time you open the box to find out whether the cat is alive or dead, there's one universe where there's a live cat and there's one universe where there's a dead cat. So, as you can imagine, you end up with an infinite number of infinite possibilities of different Earths. So we're talking about creatures which may be on those Earths. Now, there's a couple of rules. There's no magic. There's no supernatural stuff. There's only things which can be explained by what we will loosely call science. But it could be anything, it might be where there's subtle differences in history. Maybe there was a nuclear war in 1962 when the Cuban crisis went hot. Or maybe more significant, maybe sort of like Incas became the dominant race and they sort of invaded Europe rather than the other way around. Or you can go even further back and evolution took a whole different turn. Maybe a different fish got out of the water first and everything about our biology is completely different. So a huge field of possibilities, and we just want to know what sort of monsters might come through if you randomly grabbed one from one of these random alternate universes. So, starting off, Pat. Now, Pat, tell us about your monster. It's a bit different.
My monster is called the Doom Shroom. Which is the nickname that was given to it by its discoverers. The Doom Shroom comes from another world where the Cuban Missile Crisis went hot, or some nuclear conflagration happened. It doesn't matter. There are no humans, so there's nobody to record what happened. Now, most people think cockroaches would be the thing that survives humankind, but that is actually a big misnomer. Cockroaches are completely reliant on us. The thing that is not reliant on us, that would do very well in a world where everything had just died, is a particular type of fungus called... sorry, I've forgotten what it was called. Saprophytes, which are funguses that grow on dead things. So, there's no completely unchecked. This fungal growth covers most of the planet and involves an ecosystem where everything is some form of fungus. Fungus occupies a very strange space in the ecosystem anyway. It's kind of between animal and plant, so it's not too much of an idea. Anyway, the doom shroom is a big bundle of fungal clusters, which are bound together in a kind of mycelium skin. Each fungal mass is essentially its own individual organism, which is capable of thinking and moving. And when they're close together, they interact with each other in the way that the cells of a larger animal would. So essentially, it's a big mushroom. It's predatory. It's figured out, because it lives on dead flesh, it's figured out that the best way to make dead flesh is to find some living flesh and to kill it. So it voraciously seeks out people, organic matter to kill and to then spread. The really kind of interesting thing about it is because its brain is essentially made out of individual clusters, and because fungus can spread pretty much as far as it wants, this thing gets cleverer the bigger it gets. So it's possible that if it gets big enough, it would have a genius-level intellect. It would be smarter than humans. So if you could imagine if you brought this thing through from another universe, you'd be a bit worried.
I was going to ping on, you mentioned the scientists. Are these scientists from another world? Because you did say that everyone was dead.
Yeah, it was in the little thingy. It said if people summon something from another world, so that was what I was going from. I wasn't quite mentioned, but yeah, but anything. If anything, it can eat. Well, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, so how are you mentioning this? How sort of like how fast can it move? You know, does it just sort of slowly walk over to things and basically dissolve them slowly, or has it got nasty pointy teeth?
I'd imagined it as an ambush predator, almost. Like it just waits around, like wherever it can in the dark, in old ventilation systems or in trees and things like that, and sort of drops on you. It uses its weight to kind of crush you. But I imagine it's also capable of fungus, because they can shoot spores and all sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah, spores and things like that. That's a good one. Mark, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, so I was thinking, because you described essentially as the sort of or nearly intelligent eating machine. So I'm thinking about some of the research people did with slime molds, which have kind of a similar sort of behavior to what you described, but on a smaller scale, where they made it navigate a maze by giving it food to trail over. And the record, the fact they'd gone over food, meant there wasn't anymore, so it was actually able to navigate. So one of them means you could almost take control of these things. Doesn't only have to fight it. As long as you give it a trail of food that goes off in some direction, you can lead it away or do other stuff. I guess it doesn't really have many other senses. If it can't see or hear, because it doesn't have any kind of eyes or ears, then it relies entirely on chemical detection. So it can either smell you on the wind, or it just tastes what it can touch.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would be more chemical detection, because as a predator it would need to know where its prey were before it goes for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the problem is that depending on how big it was, you'd need quite a substantial amount of food. But in theory, yeah, that would work. You could easily. Are you suggesting taking control of it to just keep it away from yourself, or to use it as some form of?
One or the other, really. I mean, the first was to keep it away from yourself, or to guide it away from cities or something. But I suppose another question there is on the same kind of vein. If it lands in the field, does it motor around and try and eat as it goes, or does it just kind of grow on the spot and subsume outwards? Because there can be a lot of organic matter, obviously, of the crop or in the soil itself. Does it have much of a reason to move unless it's sitting on concrete?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, in its own dimension, everything's covered in saprophytes anyway. So, I
So
mean,
really, it's a mushroom which eats other mushrooms from its native world. It's a predator mushrooms. So given that other mushrooms probably don't move around that much, slowly growing on top of them, it's probably a perfectly valid thing. And if you think molds, I mean that's basically what molds do anyway. It's just you're just sort of thinking he's got a little bit of self motion and actually quite intelligent at certain definitions.
So I can see it's kind of this sort of ever-expanding blob kind of threat.
yeah. Well, there are funguses on our world which are actually capable of motion. The weirdest things.
It's a slime, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. As you say, slime mold.
I'm just thinking about, I don't know if you ever played the Game of Life, the computer game. It's a very simple life simulation. But you start in conditions, it follows those simple rules, and it'll take up different patterns. I'm thinking, if you drop it down into the middle of the field, it would consume where it is and grow outwards, and actually the ring would grow bigger and bigger and then split up. So you'd actually end up with sort of like these sort of lumps moving across the terrain.
Yeah, horrible blobs. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's it for mushrooms, other than the tasting of garlic. Emily, tell us about your monsters.
Yep. My monsters are called the Noctis, and they come from an Earth where in the Jurassic and Triassic period, the atmosphere was composed very differently. The pressure was completely different, which enabled early birds and reptiles to fly better, because they didn't have as much force. In this world, that continued. It didn't slow down, and when the dinosaurs all went, mammalians rose, but suddenly flying was more accessible. So the majority of non-aquatic life actually took to flying rather than ground-based. The Noctis are a race essentially a bit like bats. They're short, around 5 foot tall, very large torsos to make room for the very large lungs, covered in fur to help fly in the colder temperatures. So I'm losing my voice a bit today. With clawed hands. However, because of their hands not being as suitable as apes, they've actually stunted their societal growth. So actually by 2015 they're still very much in a tribal society. So they're very tribal-like, very simple people. But the rest of the world is very elevated as well, because with the majority of life forms being aerial-based. All the trees are taller, all the plants grow higher. So yeah, that was my idea.
I like that. I love the idea of the world where basically all life has taken to the wing. That would be very interesting. And bats, it's sort of like it's from where you're describing it. The bat's level of intelligence is like the sort of other humans before whatever we are, sapien, whatever it is. Which variety we are, but one of those Neanderthals or one of those previous forms of humanity, sort of where the bats are. They've got some intelligence, but they haven't made that final
they haven't made that jump to tools and society yet.
I must admit, actually, when you sort of first mentioned this, and I was thinking about, when they first come through, picked randomly out of this, out of their universe into ours, and they're sort of like just flying along, and then suddenly the air changes and they can no longer fly. So I had this image of these bats falling out of the sky suddenly.
The real horrific thing was their lungs would collapse because the atmospheric change. It would just complete lung shrinkage.
Ooh. Yeah, it'd be quite unpleasant for the bats, but I think we can allow for a certain amount of, if you bring the lot through, some of them are bound to survive and adapt, aren't they?
Yes. For enough of them through, one might make it.
So you bring a pocket of atmosphere through with you, so it can survive for a little bit.
Yeah, so sticking at these, what do these bats sort of normally would eat other aerial creatures, wouldn't they? I mean, from their world. But yeah, in our world with a lot less aerial creatures, they'd also have to. Well, first of all, imagine every pigeon and seagull in existence would, just quickly get eaten if these came through.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, I was just thinking, but they're going to have to adapt to eating land things as well.
Yes.
Maybe they're sort of very actually, because of the difficulty flying and everything. Actually, they spend most of the time hopping around the ground, trying to catch things.
That's the interesting thing with birds, because birds in this kind of situation, you could see them evolving higher. But birds, because of their way their brains work, they don't have the mammalian familiarity with each other. And they don't tend to form family groups. So birds still stay in that primal, though intelligent, that primal dinosaur brain, whereas mammals kind of evolve. I would picture them being more omnivorous, because obviously omnivorous animals develop intelligence faster and quicker.
Yes, because they've got better dietary sources and things. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that'd be quite, semi-intelligent bats. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was wondering a couple of things. So, have they started building a civilization?
Yeah, that's kind of picture. I pictured them having basically a bit like the Ewoks, with having cities inside the trees, right at the very top.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So they are actually building villages, covering that kind of thing. So I was thinking also at the same time about farming, because one of the first things that humanity did was we domesticated plants and animals so we could make farms. And would they do that at ground level? Would they essentially kind of build that again, kind of at canopy height?
Ooh. Yeah.
Canopy farming.
Canopy farming.
I like that.
Bungle farming.
Oh
So,
yeah.
Do that say mostly farming the taller growing fruit trees for that, or if you want other crops, maybe bringing dirt up from ground level and then kind of building platform and kind of farming at that level, or maybe parasitic plants that they can plant onto trees.
Yeah. Well, like
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
For example.
I think you definitely need sort of an ecosystem where you got lots of trees which grew fruit right at the very top. Just like flowers and things obviously have the interesting stuff at the top. So to encourage animals to come and eat them and disperse the seeds. So the first sort of farming things would be sort of like the bats collecting these seeds and sort of deliberately planting them. I mean, it's a lot slower cycle, you'd assume, 20 years to grow a tree, but that sort of plan, we'll stick these in the ground, things will grow and we'll have food in the future. That big leap at that point.
Yeah.
Do they have a religion that says that God lives on the ground?
I haven't got that far past.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What is would the society be? How would they view the ground? Would it be, touching the ground be some sort of sin?
Yeah, like when I wrote it, I said like the ground was pretty much abandoned apart from some reptiles and insect life. There was pretty much barren down. This is pretty much like their hell.
I was thinking that, as I say, it's kind of we would consider underground cave systems. So we have visions of hell and Hades and things being underground, and because it's on the surface.
Yeah, you could get because obviously when these creatures die, they're just going to fall out of the sky. You're not really going to have burial rites and things going for them.
Throw them down.
Yeah, so what you'd end up with is probably some sort of like scavenger lizards, the kimono dragons, that type of things, which just come and eat rotting flesh. So it would fit very much with an idea of hell, wouldn't it?
Yes. Or mushrooms, Pat.
Oh yeah, same universe. This is like on the top and at the bottom.
Okay, so I think we've had our fun with our bats. So. Now we've got a submission from Jay, who isn't here, but we have Mark. So Mark is going to be Jay.
I will be pseudo J. Pig iron. So iron pig. So this is the idea where the supernova that formed the nebula, which created our star system, say that was more massive. So that gives you more of the heavy metals, particularly iron. So which means that the Earth's crust is then very, very rich in iron. And at that point, then take the leap, you can say that Earth's early life starts to evolve to use iron actually in their bodies for stuff other than blood. So shells and teeth, for example, actually began to incorporate the metal into themselves. And so from this world, from this reality, comes pig iron. So it's kind of like a wild boar, so it's about 4 feet tall at the shoulder. Um, but as in, it's covered in thick iron plates, pretty much impervious to most things apart from obviously the most modern weapon accurate attacks. And then the metallic tusks for attacking with when it's angry. And so for a lot of the time, it tends to be omnivorous and kind of happy to eat carrion. So generally speaking, but obviously with something like iron, it's something which the creature can't create itself. It has to harvest iron from what it eats. So ones which have come straight from the world tend to have very thick iron plating from what they've eaten. Any young born here, because say these things have been taken through and they've kind of settled, more or less, they've taken, anyone born here will tend to have much less. Because unless conservation, for example, feeds them metal or lace their food with iron so that they can then grow their plates and tusks. So James got a note here for the younger ones here. They don't really have any armor plating. You can take that a bit further and say that they can't really breed here unless you feed them iron. Because if they've got iron in their iron on their plates and their skin, then it makes sense for them to have iron in their bones as well.
Yeah. So effectively, they're sort of like using metal. They've got sort of biological metallic combinations. I mean, much in the same way we use calcium or carbon or whatever else. They just use a higher percentage of iron, and naturally that gives their body certain, behaviour. So yeah, I love that idea that sort of semi-metallic animals. From purely gaming point of view, you can easily justify them having lots of armor, so hard to kill. Just imagining the adventurers trying to hit one with a sword and it goes clang. It's not the sort of thing you expect from an animal.
I think in that sense, from a kind of a gameplay sense, they're a big, heavily armored thing that's hard to hit. Pat, you've got a opinion there.
I just think this sounds very heavy metal. You can imagine this kind of sweeping camera vista of these giant iron boars and something like Mastodon playing in the background.
Yeah, I was thinking you were saying about what would happen in our world. Would need to be fed metal. I was thinking, well, would they naturally be drawn to iron-rich substances? Would they sit around chewing? I don't know, bits of metal lying around. You'll find them in scrapyards.
I like the idea to say get a news report. Right? Okay, we've got to be careful around Portsmouth because obviously there's been a release of the pig irons again. So keep your cars out of the area and don't go walking because they've eaten the manhole covers. And that is go around and just chew on things like lampposts. This is true. Power goes down in the city for a while, because they've eaten the legs off a pylon.
Yeah, or just you can give the players some weird hints about what's coming up. You see a manhole cover with a strange sort of looks like it's been licked a lot, or it's got nibble marks. I mean, is iron magnetic? Is that the one?
It is, yeah.
Yes, so then there's lots of opportunities there as well.
Pat, pinging again, conductive.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm assuming that these things... Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that these things use iron in their biology in the same way that animals on Earth use, like, calcium. So essentially their skeletons would probably be iron. Yeah, as you said, their hides are iron. Does that mean they conduct electricity? Because if they're ferrous, then they should be better conductors than organisms are on Earth. Which means that they would... If you conduct it... Like, they could eat power lines, is what I was trying to get at. That's just because... Yeah, sorry.
I'm not sure whether, how iron you need to be before you decently conduct electricity without sort of starting to smoulder and, offering resistance. So, I don't know, there's better people with more knowledge of physics in the room than me. But yeah, just the idea of the pig eating a power line and sort of like the players not quite realising it's therefore live.
Yeah. Swallowed a battery.
But the other thing is, because we have iron in our bodies, I mean, obviously in our blood for hemoglobin, and that helps carry the oxygen around. Would they actually be better at carrying oxygen around? Would that make them faster, stronger?
Yeah, let's go with that. I like that idea because it just makes them more dangerous. So then we just go around and say they're better carry oxygen, they can process more oxygen. Yeah, I quite like that.
Yeah, because I think it probably makes them very good for short bursts, because the difference between, say, like 100-meter sprinters and sort of 400 meters is you use a completely different energy system, and I think the 100 meters, they're sort of just basically taking it out of their blood as opposed to fat deposits and things like that, in very simplistic terms. So you could have, it's an oxygen-rich blood, so they can drain it really, really quickly to power their muscles, and so we get really strong bursts of speed, but I've got no endurance.
Yeah, I quite like that again because they'll be very heavy since they're mostly metal. But I think another thing as well with some of the you mentioned is magnetism. You could do this quite a handy plot hook. So say you got quite weak players and quite a powerful one of these things, they can find out where it is just by holding onto a compass. They can see the deviation in the needle as it hunts them around the building, for example.
Yeah, so I'm just reminded of that scene in Aliens.
That's kind of what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And yeah, I think I would be forced to set an encounter with them in the scrapyard where you've got one of those big giant magnets. Okay, I think that's enough magnetic pigs, or sort of pig irons, which I really love. That one I think I might hijack, because it's a really silly but fun monster to put in. Okay, right, finally, really, my idea. I've got intelligence. So this is from an alternate Earth where evolution took a very different track after the death of the dinosaurs. And what emerged was, basically insects became the dominant life form, very few sort of other animals, and we eventually end up with intelligence. Now, here on Earth, our Earth, a few different types of ants, in colonies of just a few hundred ants in total. So if you have warriors and queens making up your colony, that colony can exhibit some really quite strange behaviour. Obviously we can go out and find new locations for that colony. There's even ones, and I don't know if you saw it on QI, which sort of form, basically they make a raft. They all sort of link their arms and form a raft, and they put the eggs on the raft, and they use that to escape floods. So that's in our world with just small colonies. Intelligence have colonies with the millions and millions of different ants and thousands of specialized types of ants. So the end result is sentience. Just as the cells, neurons, and bacteria make up our human intelligence, different types of ants in large numbers make up intelligence. So it's not one ant is intelligent. Even the queens aren't sentient any more than, say, our eyelashes or toenails are sentient. But the colony as a whole is. So these colonies can communicate. They're intelligent. They communicate. They trade, share resources. They form nations. They fight wars. They can mate by colonies coming together and splitting up, taking some of the ants from each colony. They have technology. They use tools. Though they're totally alien in appearance and culture to us humans, they are equal to us in terms of capability and intelligence. However, from our point of view, it's going to be very hard to spot this intelligence. You see some ants running around, they're just ants maybe fetching food or doing whatever ants do. You don't necessarily know they're ants carrying a message from, the equivalent of an arm to the central nervous system. Individual ants moving around might be individual thoughts, effectively. So they're completely alien to us. So we will just sort of avoid them, or simply treat them as a nuisance, like if you're having a picnic. But when you see one or more colonies moving, they form these huge seething mass of millions and millions of ants, and exhibiting behaviour such as picking things up, using tools. Only then would you actually realise these creatures are intelligent. But the flip side is also true. from the ant's perspective, the intelligence is going to be really hard to spot in humans because we communicate, we behave in different ways, and you could actually have a situation where the ants and the humans are coexisting and neither realizing that the other one is sentient. So that's intelligence. So, Pat, you're pinging.
It's actually M.
Oh,
How many ants would you need to create each kind of colony intelligence? I mean, like you say, if they accidentally got split in half, would they just naturally try and reform, or half the colony is wiped out? Would it be kind of almost stunted? Or would it just slowly become more intelligent as it kind of reproduced?
well, I think that would be. I mean, I think in terms of sort of number of ants, I don't know how many cells we have in our body, or how many neurons we have. So in total number of ants, any colony's got to be, in the well into the millions to sort of give you the level of complexity. So yeah, if you cut it in half, well, it might be that both halves die because you might need a critical mass of certain types of ants to need it, just like we need a critical mass of blood in our circulation system to survive. So it could kill them. Maybe it might cripple them. Maybe they could never recover enough. So it would be just like losing one of our legs. If they never regrow, we don't die, but arguably we'd be reduced in some way. So yeah, it's an interesting question. How much do you have to do to them to destroy them, or to kill them, really? Pat?
That was me. I'm going to ask something here, because you said they were intelligent on the level of humans, and the question I'm going to ask is, what does something like that do for fun?
Well, same things. What's good to really appreciate is how would such a colony have it? How would it get its sensors? What would it sense? It would get information back from ants going out exploring, getting it basically affected the touch. It probably, as a colony as a whole, would detect things like touch, in sort of like a wind. A wind it would be able to sense. Maybe it. Individual ants reacting to light would give it some sort of basic level of vision. So it can perceive the world. So therefore, it can be entertained by anything. And you'd imagine that just like any other creature, it'll be interested in sex. It'll be that raw stimulus, sex. Sense of humour. Religion. Any of those behaviours might evolve out of any form of intelligence.
How do they form an intelligence? How do a lot of individual ants form an intelligence? Do they have to be touching each other, or is it kind of like a telepathy kind of thing where they're all kind of linked?
Well, it's the context of emergent intelligence. How does one neuron make you intelligent? Well, it doesn't. It's about lots of neurons working together, and you don't need to know what your neurons are doing to be intelligent.
No, that's true.
So that I'm imagining it would have to work on they would still almost be slower than us, because obviously our nervous system works really quite quickly, in hundreds of milliseconds. But if your nervous system is a line of ants walking along, then obviously there's a certain speed limit on how fast those ants can go. So because they're working on that very different different speed level, that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to spot their intelligence. Mark? Mark? Have you frozen, Mark? You've just posted a comment, Mark. No. All right, Mark has just managed to comment. So Mark is... What he's asked is multiple intelligence in one colony or just one per. Mark, are you back? No, he's not. So no, I was thinking one intelligence per colony. It's one colony is equivalent to one person. So all the ants in one colony makes up a person, just as all the cells in us makes up a person. Are you back now, Mark?
I don't know. You tell me.
Yes, you appear to be back.
I thought I was back. I was pressing the buttons to turn the microphone on off, and it wasn't doing anything. Right, so the question was, you talked about the emotional intelligence and also the idea of humour, but who is it told jokes to? So I was wondering, is there only one intelligence, sentience, per colony? Or if you had a big collection of ants, could you have multiple minds running in the same colony? Would you even have the concept of a single mind?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting. I'm thinking that one mind per colony, that all the different ants in the colony effectively gives it the level of intelligence of one person.
Okay.
But how many ants does that need? If it needs 10 million ants to make that happen, what happens if you get a pile of 20 million ants? And I think it's sort of like. I'm imagining it sort of. They would sort of split, because you'd imagine there's going to be sort of like an optimum size for this to work, because
I think it kind of depends on like communication overheads and things like that, because once it gets too big, they spend more time communicating than actually working.
That's right. And also simple things like heat. If you get a big ball of ants, they're generating quite a lot of heat and it will kill. So there's going to be lots of physical limitations, just like there's limitations to how big a human can technically be before some of these sort of biomechanical systems will start to break down.
Okay. So yeah, I was just wondering, because if you had sort of one big colony, could you have with essentially multiple minds inside it, and also would get a bigger question as well: is would something like an ant colony have anything that vaguely resembles a human mind?
Well. It's about intelligence. It wouldn't be like a human mind, but if it's using tools and communicating, then you'd say it was intelligent.
It's certainly intelligent, but it would be a fundamentally alien being.
Absolutely. So you imagine if you sort of like got this idea that this was intelligent, how would you even start to communicate with it?
Yeah.
How would you have to sort of engineer ants to go into the colony and sort of send its pheromones and things like that, or could you sort of like draw a big picture somewhere and sooner or later the ant colony will notice it and draw one back?
That's gonna be fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
The interesting thing for the players to encounter. Yeah, okay, that's quite cool. I was also trying to work out what jokes an ant colony would tell.
Yeah, it would be very hard. You'd have to think long and hard what sort of society would evolve, because your joke's going to be contextual. But yeah, do you have your equivalent of my dog has no nose? How does it smell? Is there sort of a colony equivalent?
But also the idea of society. I mean, your colony is not a society of ants. It's one society of beings. It's only one being. Mm-hmm. So to have a society, to have groups, they have to have multiple things for it to do. So different colonies were interacting with each other. Would they build a civilization? Would they be quite happy with each individual thing just doing its own thing?
Yeah, there could easily be. That's what I'm thinking. That ultimately this is evolving up to a civilization level. So you have the farm working colonies, which basically are sort of collecting food from the countryside and bringing it into the cities, where the banker ants are doing. I don't know quite how money would work for an ant colony, but that's a completely different question. Yeah. But yeah, colonies would have jobs. Society would fit together. They would shape the world around them because they're truly intelligent. Pat, you've got an interesting observation.
Just a question of mental illness. If they have got a mind, essentially, could it be possible that it could go mad? And could it be something that it's something purposeful, like a rival ant could go and kill so many of another colony to make the colony mad?
Like performing a lobotomy?
Yeah, like performing a lobotomy.
Yeah, because you do get those fungus things which grow through ants and take over ants, don't you? Individual ones. So if a colony got infected with some fungus or thing which killed off certain types of ants within the colony, or just reduced the number by a certain amount, you could start seeing the colony doing some bizarre behaviour. So yeah, there could be weapons, just as like we developed sort of gases and things poisons which damage the mind.
Speaking like it's sometimes when a queen is removed from an ant colony, the kind of chaos that it causes. Like, what would happen if, say, the queen, if it does have a role, does removing the queen cause the colony to collapse amongst itself because it just doesn't know what to do anymore?
I suppose the nearest equivalent would be removing somebody's womb. You know. Well, if you do it the right way, actually, it can be a beneficial operation, life-saving or whatever. But if you just reach in there and rip it out, then obviously it's not a thing. So yeah, you can sort of draw analogies for human existence and ant colonies, but the actual how that would work would be really sort of interesting to work out.
Yeah, because like with ant colonies, if you remove the queen, the colony dies within so many weeks because the queen's the only one who reproduces. Whereas if you have a hysterectomy, you're not going to die if it's done right.
Yeah, actually, a better analogy might be something like your kidneys or your liver, which is filtering your blood and things like that. Because you need this constant supply of new ants, it's like your blood production more than, say, as I say, womb. So right, I think that's it for tonight. We've had some intelligent ants, mushrooms, and bats, and metal pigs. Em, would you like to take us through some pluses and deltas?
Yeah, I'll start with me, pluses and deltas. Pluses, I really love stuff like this. I really love getting to think about alternative worlds. I getting to think about ideas about evolution and how animals work. My only delta is that I could be talking about this all night, and I really don't have time. So I'll pass to Pat.
Okay, well, my plus is I really liked hearing Chris say the words banker ants. That did something fundamental to my funny bone. I don't know, do you think I've got a delta for this week? To be honest. Sorry.
That's okay. Your delta can be that you have no delta. Mark.
Pluses. Being able to really go over some ideas and chat back and forth about them a lot more. We have also got quite good, I think, particularly in small groups, where we can actually converse back and forth over the video link without talking over each other quite so much, which means that we can use a ping to start a conversation thread and then talk about it for a bit without being quite such a kind of stepping back and forth between people. I think it's quite good, that improves flow and makes things cooler. Deltas. Blog. Not being able to come up with an idea of my own and having to use James's instead. Makes me sad. Mike?
Yes, I missed the button. I missed it. Yes, we'll let you off, Mark, because you have been ill, so you are forgiven. Right, yes, my pluses. Yeah, it's sort of a bit like yours, Mark, in that that having the small group, it's given us more of a chance to have a conversation and go in depth. But I also miss having lots of people, so my delta is we haven't got enough people either. So I'm completely schizophrenic about this. We have exactly the right number of people and not enough people. So that's my pluses and deltas. I'm going to hand over to Mark to do a sign-off.
Yes. So, signing off now. Next week, we're going to change the format a bit and have a more general discussion about role-playing itself, rather than just generating ideas to 66. And in this case, it's talking about limits. How far is too far? And how do you go about setting that out in your games? And what's a good way of doing that? So there are some games in there which cut pretty close to the bone in terms of what people do. And people have a lot of differing opinions, for example, on stuff like sex in games. So we wanted to chew that kind of fat around for a bit and see what we can come up with. So this is us for this week, and that will be us for next week. Thank you very much for your time and paying attention to us, and we will see you same place, same time.